Hi everyone, welcome back to the Brad the Chimera channel, lectures on fascinating texts, and this time I'm talking about James Joyce's The Dead, which I'm going to argue is all about the fragility of the male ego, in particular the ego of Gabriel Conroy, the protagonist, who has three encounters with women who challenge his ego to some extent and show just how fragile it really is. So the first encounter is the least challenging, really, because it happens with Lily, the caretaker's daughter, so Gabriel Conroy's social inferior. And he arrives at the Mrs. Morgan's holiday party, and Lily greets him with a very deferential question. Is it snowing again, Mr. Conroy? And clearly it is. But Gabriel gets to assert himself with a firm, authoritative answer. He says, "Yes, Lily, and I think we're in for a night of it." So this is a little successful start to Gabriel's evening. But soon enough, this interaction with Lily turns sour. And he says, "Tell me, Lily," in a friendly voice, "do you still go to school?" And Lily says, No, I'm done schooling this year and more. And then he decides, okay, well, if she's not still in school, then she's bound to be getting married soon, right? So he says, oh, then I suppose we'll be going to your wedding one of these fine days with your young man, eh? And Lily glanced back at him with great bitterness and says, the man that is now is only all palaver and what they can get out of you. So this is a very negative response. Gabriel blushes and starts flicking the snow off his galoshes very actively. And it turns out, of course, that Lily has had some very troublesome encounter with a young man who may have even gotten her pregnant. We're told later that Lily is not the girl she was at all. So there's a sense in which, Gabriel's naive assumptions that Lily is having this sort of ideal young womanhood, those assumptions are radically flawed. Anyway, so this is a bad start to his evening, but he tries to make good on it, nevertheless, by thrusting a coin into Lily's hands as a little tip to buy her off, so to speak, telling her it's Christmas time, and she reluctantly accepts this little bribe, which is really nothing more than a reassertion that he is her social superior and she ought to be deferential to him. So Gabriel is continuing through the evening, and he meets a woman named Miss Ivers that he knows from his education. And Miss Ivers is different from the other women at this party because she did not wear a low-cut bodice. In other words, she is not wearing an outfit that sort of showcases her feminine charms. And instead, she wears a large brooch, which was fixed on the front of her collar, that bore an Irish device. So something like a Celtic cross, perhaps. Gabriel doesn't know exactly what it was because he's not very familiar with his own Irish culture. And Miss Ivers takes him up on that immediately and starts quizzing him about what are his holiday plans, why doesn't he come for a cycling trip in the south of Ireland. Gabriel says, well, I'd rather go biking on the continent. And she ends up calling him a West Briton, which is a very pejorative word for an Irish person who behaves as if they are English. And Gabriel is deeply unnerved by that. However, Miss Ivers takes herself away. She kind of realizes, I suppose, that she's been rude to Gabriel, and she leaves the party early. So Gabriel, his ego has again been bruised a little bit, but her absence kind of renews his spirits, and he starts thinking about how he can say something not very nice about Miss Ivor's overeducated generation in the speech that he's going to give, which is the central point, really, of Gabriel's performance at this holiday party. And he does indeed go on to give a nice speech praising his hostesses, the Mrs. Morkan, as the three graces of Dublin's musical society. His speech is very well received, and he sits down to applause. And as the night starts winding down, Gabriel sees his wife listening to a piece of music that's being sung by a tenor, Bartel Darcy. And he has a moment of aesthetic pleasure, contemplating his wife's beautiful, graceful attitude and essentially looking forward to having sex with her later that night. So they ride home, well, not home, but to a hotel in a cab drawn by horses. And Gabriel starts, chatting to Greta when they reach the hotel and asks her what she's thinking about because she's looking sort of pensive and withdrawn. And she says, "Oh, I'm thinking about the song that I heard." And the song is called "The Lass of Aughrim." And Gabriel asks, "Okay, well, why are you thinking of that song?" And Greta answers, "Well, I knew a boy who used to sing it." And Gabriel's like, "Oh, who was this boy anyway?" And Greta says, "Oh, he worked in the gasworks." So again, a social inferior. But Gabriel suddenly feels very jealous of Greta, and he asks her, "Oh, do you want to go back to Galway to see him somehow? Do you want to go on that cycling trip that Miss Ivors is proposing to the south of Ireland?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" Because it turns out that Michael Fury, the name of the boy who used to sing the song, Michael Fury is dead. And Gabriel has seen basically his plans to seduce his wife and perform the ultimate assertion of his male prerogatives fall to dust because Greta is upset. She's crying on the bed, and she basically cries herself to sleep. And Gabriel is left to contemplate his failure, and he catches a glimpse of himself in the mirror that's very telling. Let's see. Gabriel felt humiliated by the failure of his irony. He had sort of ironically asked Greta about, who was this poor boy, essentially. In the evocation of this figure from the dead, a boy in the gasworks, while he had been full of memories of their secret life together, full of tenderness and joy and desire, she had been comparing him in her mind with another. A shameful consciousness of his own person assailed him. He saw himself as a ludicrous figure, acting as a penny boy for his aunts, a nervous, well-meaning sentimentalist, orating to vulgarians and idealizing his clownish lusts. The pitiable, fatuous fellow he had caught a glimpse of in the mirror. Instinctively, he turned his back more to the light, lest she might see the shame that burned upon his forehead. So Gabriel is he is the most grown-up man we meet in the whole book of stories, Dubliners, that precedes the dead in most editions, like this one of Joyce's Dubliners. And most of the stories leading up to the dead are full of either children, very young boys who experience frustrations or horrible encounters with other people that show that Dublin is not a safe place to grow up, basically. Or people who are stuck in permanent adolescence, single men who kind of won't have an adult relationship with a woman, or who, like little Chandler in the story A Little Cloud, are kind of frozen in an adolescent literary mindset where they fantasize about writing poems expressing gentle Celtic melancholy and so forth. So by the time we get to the dead, we're really hoping to meet a grown-up man. And Gabriel is different from most of the men we see in the rest of the stories in that he is successful. He has achieved a certain social status. He's happily married, or at least he thinks he is until the story's climax, when he questions all of that. So basically what Joyce is showing us in The Dead is that Ireland, for which Dublin is a microcosm, is not a place for men to grow up into functional adults who can be fulfilled in their circumstances or in their lives, which is a way of explaining why Joyce himself chose to leave Ireland as a young man and only to return sporadically, though he wrote about Ireland, of course, in all of his work. Anyway, that's my take on The Dead. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you soon.